recording. We will be recording the series. I do apologize, I started the recording a bit late. We'll be recording the series. For those who join us late or miss the series entirely, you'll be able to catch up on YouTube. So if you're not comfortable with the recording, please, you know what to do, but we look forward to our session today. Professor Rachel Musoke, you're very, very welcome today. And I will hand over to Beverly to take us through this conversation. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Sophia. I wish everybody here a wonderful morning. We're going to enjoy this Saturday's session. Professor Musoke, if we were in the same room physically, I want you to know that I'll be kneeling in front of you out of cultural respect. So in my heart of hearts, believe me when I tell you that I'm actually kneeling down.
Okay.
How is your morning, Professor?
My morning is fine, and I hope you are aware you are my grandchild.
Yes, yes, more reason why I would be kneeling. So wonderful.
It's a wonderful
The things I discovered,
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I discovered so much in this research, and I called Sanyu and Sophia and said, what do I do? There is so much. And that's the beauty of today, this conversation. And we're going to delve into appreciating, understanding, learning who you are as we build our own knowledge and inspiration. And this conversation will really endeavor to cover your childhood, your success, family, career. The aim is to focus on you. And you may answer how you feel fit, because you have a wealth of experience, which we're ready to learn from. Thank you so much again.
I hope so.
I'm going to begin from your childhood.
Yeah.
We'll begin from your childhood. That's a wonderful place to start.
Yes.
And I'll talk about when you were growing up, what were some of the principles that governed your childhood, and how have they influenced who you are today?
Okay, childhood is a beautiful experience. First of all, usually because you don't have big responsibilities, but at the same time, you actually do have responsibilities of growing up and becoming who you will be later on. In our time, early childhood was spent at home. We didn't have all these, whatever you have these days of going to daycare, going to nursery school, and so forth. So the home was a time when you are taught everything. You are taught how to behave in the right way. But also parents took it up to themselves, even though they didn't have preschool, whatever, to teach us how to write, how to read, how to count. Now, those days, we didn't even have paper to write on. So most often you would be writing on the ground. You write, it gets erased, something else comes up, you write whatever it is, and so forth. Eventually, things like a slate came in, where you could now be able to write on, and you could erase so that it was a reusable whatever. It seems to have disappeared from whatever. And of course, now you have the computers and everything, which you can still write and delete or whatever you want to call it. Now, during the childhood, usually there were lots of people, at least in our home. Our home was a home where relatives congregated. Both my mom and my dad were quite high up in their families, so that they actually brought in their younger siblings to live with us. And in fact, my parents supported some of those younger siblings through school. Bedtime was a good time because mom used to we used to have stories from my mom she would tell you, get into your bed. Then she starts a story. And you know, most of the Chiganda stories have songs. So you joined in the songs as the story was being narrated, which was, I think, a good way of learning even how to sing and whatever. In our home, there was a gentleman called Tanansi. He had the Chiganda traditional flute. I think if he had lived these days, he would have been one of those people who would have been promoted. I don't know. But we would ask him, Tanas, play for us. And he would play for us, and we would be sitting there with him, and we enjoy his flute playing and whatever. Probably that's how our music talents came in. I don't know. I'm just trying to think back of what might have influenced me in going into some of the things that I have. But of course, during those days, you don't even think about it. You just enjoy listening to what he was playing. The other thing that I think used to happen in those days is that villages used to live together. People used to live together. So the other adults within the area looked out for each other's children, and they would discipline you if they found you not behaving the way they thought. Then they would tell your parents, and then the parents could also decide to discipline you or not, or they may think whatever you got from the other was okay. So in a way, I think it was good that the whole society around you looked out for each other, so that you could be able to learn from not only from your mom and dad, but from the other people within the neighborhood. And of course, eventually one goes to school. My schooling for primary school, I started in a day school, but it was for just 1 year of day school. We used to walk those days. We used to count in miles. We used to walk about 2 miles to school. You can imagine a 6-year-old and my sister, who was 5 years old. We used actually to walk to school because that was the way to get to school. And okay, you went to school. That school was very interesting because it was in the village in Chivoga. Those of you who might have lived in Chivoga might know what, of course, Chivoga these days probably is different. But on the way to school, there used to be a river, but it used to be a seasonal river. So it would only appear during the rainy seasons. Now, for those of us who are still small, we could not cross that river. So what used to happen is that the older children who are going to school, we would get there and wait. The older children who would be with us would carry us across to the other side, and then we would proceed to school. So those are some of the things that I remember from that school. And then, of course, from about P3, I went to a boarding school. Boarding school those days was not, personally, I don't think it was fun. There was a lot, when you go to school, you missed your parents. It wasn't easy for them to visit. If they are told they managed to visit maybe once, because of course transport then was difficult. Probably sometimes once a term, but sometimes not at all. So you didn't see your parents until holiday time. Now, as a pediatrician, I think that was something that we really missed, being with our parents during those growing up years. The teachers then were very strict. no-nonsense kind of situation. So you actually, anyway, I don't know. It wasn't a very easy period of that childhood that.
Yeah. No, thank you. You've shared important lessons. I just imagine your house being full of life and children and adults as well. Yes. And there were challenges, but there must have been strengths too. And you've spoken a lot about non-formal education. When you said that you first wrote on a slate, I read the autobiography of Wangari Maathai, and she first went to school at the age of 13 because boys went to school before girls. But she went on to be highly successful. And of course, non-formal education from home was really instrumental in her growing up. And if I'm correct, if she had been alive, you'd both be the same age. Didn't you celebrate your youthful 76th birthday this month?
Yeah, I think we'll be about the same age. Yes.
Both iconic women. We wish you a happy birthday from all of us here on the forum. Please accept our warm birthday greetings. And you have many friends here with you on the forum. Professor Maggie Chigozi is also here, and she greets you.
Thank you.
She greets you well.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you said about the education from home, the principles you learn from home. My children can hardly walk to the kitchen, to the bedroom to bring me water without taking 10 minutes and justifying why they shouldn't do it. But you walked miles to go from one place to the other. Can you share how we as parents can also improvise some of that even today? The dynamics have changed, but what lessons can we pick as parents and guardians nurturing non-formal education from home to raise our children?
Okay, depends on what kind of home you have. Many of the homes today, you have additional house help. And quite often you find that the children leave everything to the house help. I think it's very important for a child as they grow up to learn how to do the things that is being done by the house help. For example, washing up clothes. I mean, you have to learn to wash up your clothes, because when you grow up, who will do it for you? And of course, if you go to boarding school, who will do it for you when you go to boarding school? Working in the kitchen. There's nothing degrading working in the kitchen. You should be able to do everything, that washing up, cooking. We learned how, our mom taught us how to peel, how to cook. And of course, in the earlier days, she would do part of it, but leave you to finish. But as we grew older, then she would leave you even to prepare a full meal. And I think this is something children have to learn right from the beginning. Sometimes you find some people who have grown up and they don't even know how to cook an egg. You see them sometimes, and I think it's deplorable to have somebody who can not make a meal for themselves, because they were never given the chance to do it when they were growing.
That's a lesson for all of us. Thank you so much. I read about the schools you attended in high school. Clearly, primary was different. You went to day school and then boarding school, and you said it was difficult being away from your parents. I would like to go on to secondary school, if you may. How did you arrive at the decision to attend the schools you attended? You were in Ndejje High School, Gayaza High School, and King's College, Buddo. I'd like to know, how did those decisions come?
The decisions. Okay, in our days, the school system was slightly different, because we had 6 years of primary school, and then we have secondary school, which was subdivided into junior secondary and senior secondary. So when we were in P6, you had to choose a school which to go to, the secondary school. Of course, those days the schools were not that many. And quite often everybody would want to choose the school that were being regarded as their school. Gayaza being one of them for girls, and of course Budo, and going around the country, there was Mwiri, there was Intare, there was Duhaga, and all those other schools around the country that people within the area emulated to go to. So for us, I think Gayaza was probably at the time the school that most girls wanted to go to. So when P6, you filled in your choices, but I don't know how we did the choices. But anyway, I ended up in Gayaza, Gayaza High School in Junior 1. Then for junior school was 2 years. So Junior 2, you had to do another exam to go into senior school. Probably that would be now the equivalent of P7. And in Kenya, I think at the time that I was there, it was a standard 8 when people would now go to the secondary school. So for us, we went to secondary school, junior secondary, and then senior secondary. So those 2 years of junior school, I was in Gayaza. Again, at the time of Junior 2, you had to fill in another choice. Did you want to stay in Gayaza? Did you want to move to another school? Some of I think my classmates in J2, Junior 2, went to other schools rather than going to Gayaza. And it was interesting because when you were accepted to go to senior school, what used to happen is if you got a fat letter, if your parents brought home a fat letter, it means that you've been admitted to the senior school. If it was a thin letter, it meant that you had not been admitted. Now, in that time, if you were not admitted to S1, as we used to call it then, there was Junior 3. So those people who were not able to go to S1 would go into Junior 3 and then do another exam. Some of them who did very well then came back to join S1, which meant that if you went to Junior 3, the classmates that you were with in Junior 2 would be already ahead, they would be in S2. So you would be a year behind, but probably it didn't matter too much, but at least those who did not manage to go into the senior school then could go to other training colleges, nursing, whatever, vocational kind of schools. So that was the system then.
Yes, about the system, in trying to understand, were there other influences? Because we know you come from a family that really has made recognizable impact, the Masembe family. And many of them did pass through King's College, Buda, and Gayaza High School. Did your siblings influence that decision as well?
I'm not sure if my siblings, because, by the time I was going to junior school, I think my sister was already in Makerere, Joyce, that is Joyce. Yes. But I don't remember her telling us you must put Gayaza or whatever.
Yes.
Probably it was influence of our parents rather than my older siblings. At that time, my brother was in Budo, but of course, during those days, most girls preferred going to Gayaza than going to Budo, although it was still a co-educational school. So choices, I think, were probably dictated by parents, rather than the siblings.
And the big fat letter, you would know from the size of the letter.
Yes, so when the big fat letter came, you knew you were going to S1 in Gayaza, And then, of course, he went to Gayaza Senior and started the senior school, which was, of course, up to O level, which was 4 years. It's still 4 years of O level now. So it was not different then.
What are some of the memorable times there? Funny? What kind of a person were you? Were you naughty? Or did you get into trouble? What were punishments like at that time in Gayaza? What did you dislike and what did you like?
Okay, first of all, I think right from early on and probably through Gayaza, I was a very quiet person. In fact, people who see me these days probably would not believe that I'm what I am. The routine was the same. You did your housework. You worked on the farm. We were when the farm you were allocated areas when the farm where you could work. We had a farmer, Miss Pamela Good, who would teach us farming. You could be working with the cows. You could be working in the orchard. You could be working anywhere within the farm. The good thing with that farming is that most of the things that we produced were actually the things we ate in our dining room. Yes. So as a result of that, and of course, Kabanyolo farm was next door. The Gayaza farm and Kabanyolo farm was just a fence between them. So I believe some of whatever we couldn't grow from our farm could have been accessed from the Kabanyolo farm.
Yes.
As a result of that, I think one of the things that are memorable is our diet in Gayaza. It was excellent. When you tell people what it used to be like, people say, "Wow!" And we had a lady. I think probably she was a nutritionist. We don't know, who was in charge of the dining room. They could bake. They could make us very nice, delicious dishes. Lunchtime, we used to eat with our teachers.
Oh.
Yeah, our teachers used to be with us at least lunchtime. But dinner time, they used to have their own. But lunchtime, all the teachers used to eat. So you would be sitting with the teacher, usually your house teacher or your class teacher or whatever. So they would be distributed on the table so that at least you have at least one teacher per table. So in a way, probably they helped us to learn how to table manners and blah, blah, but they used to be with us at least for lunch.
That's so different from today. It could be the growing population or the busyness of teachers, but that's a really excellent practice. I know now it's prefects that sit with the children, maybe to pass on the table manners as well. School has changed, education has changed, and I think a lot that has changed is the emphasis on social etiquette. Yeah. If you were to run a school today, what 3 subjects would you definitely include, given the wonderful experience you had growing up as a student and a pupil? What 3 subjects would you include for a child's beautification and excellence as they grow up?
Okay, one of them I've already mentioned, home care.
Yes.
Self-care is very crucial. I think many of the things that we learn as children are the things that you're going to practice as an adult. Secondly, I think one of the things that I feel missed in our schools is learning how to use money. Okay, we were given pocket money. In Gayaza, I remember we used to give in our pocket money, and it used to be called a bank. So the teachers, I don't know where they kept the money, but anyway. So every I think either Friday or Saturday, you would be given a portion of your money to use to buy things that you needed. However, probably that was not enough, because as you grow up, you find that, for example, when eventually you start working, you are never taught how to use that salary that you have earned. You were never taught about saving. You were never taught about investing or using that money to whatever, grow it into more. Those are things I think should be really taught from a very early on period, so that when you grow up, then you are able to, and of course, learning how to spend that money. We, generally speaking, I think, especially Ugandans, we have a spending culture. Spending beyond what you even earn. But if we are taught that with whatever you got, even if it's one, okay, let me put it in the present day shillings. If you take 10,000 shillings, you are never taught that save part of it. And quite often you find that people say, I'm earning so little, so I cannot save. But if you don't save, even the little that you have will never multiply. So those are things that I think we missed out in school, and I don't know whether they are being taught these days.
Thank you. I wish I could sit at your feet for a week. I'd come out a person. So 3 subjects you've mentioned: home care, self-care, and financial management. I'd like to just mention, if anyone has joined us, you're here for Pearls of Wisdom, which is a program initiated by one of the old Gayaza girls from class of 91. And our guest today is Professor Rachel Musoke, a retired pediatrician who has so much wisdom to share. We will allow questions towards the last 30 minutes of this session that we're in. Now, there's just so much about you, Professor, and you speak so honestly about caring for children. As a pediatrician, I want to know, how did you complete the medical degrees and pediatric fellowships so well? Because I read that at one time, we're going now to your post-secondary, one time in a class of 60, there were only 8 females and only 3 were Africans. So please take us through that transition of secondary to medical school and how you came to the decision of taking a pediatric fellowship and specializing in that.
Okay. When I left Gayaza, okay, when we reached S4, our class was actually the first class to do higher school, HSC, in Gayaza. Now, it so happened that they were only offering art subjects, and at that time, I had decided I wanted to go into sciences. So the choice was, now I had to go to another school to do my HSC or A-level, as you want to call it. So at that time, that's when I transited to Budo to do my higher school. From Budo, I was there for 2 years, of course, of HSC. In my science class, I was the only girl in the science class. So when then, of course, at that time, then we had to make our choices on what do you want to study. In our time, there was, of course, the University of East Africa, which University of East Africa was constituent colleges: Makerere, Nairobi, it used to be Royal College, and Dar es Salaam. Makerere used to do agriculture, the professionals used to do agriculture and medicine. Nairobi used to do engineering, architecture, and I think vet and whatever. And Dar es Salaam was low. Of course, since I was going to do medicine, the only choice that we had was to go to Makerere, because there was no other medical school at the time that we, during that time. So I did my, okay, we were just 8 girls in the class, but memorable time with my 8 girls. We were only 2 Africans within the, there was Irene Eunice Waga from Kenya and myself from Uganda. The rest were of Asian descent. But the good thing with those girls, much as we differed in culture, we worked together as girls. So when we were celebrating, because some were Muslims, some were Hindus, some were Christians and whatever. So we used to celebrate each other's holiday as they came by. And in fact, I remember there was one of our classmates, Daksha, she was a Tanzanian. She was very good at Indian dancing. So we tell her, Daksha, dance for us. And she would do all those very good Indian solo dances that we enjoyed so much. Sometimes these girls even used to take us to Indian films because so it was a memorable time. It didn't really matter whether you were a girl or a boy. Medical school is medical school. You had to do what everybody was supposed to do, that is study and proceed on to whatever you needed. And of course, medical school every year is a transitional year. You have to pass that year before you go into to the following year, and so forth. Sometimes a few people would be deferred and asked to repeat a year or repeat whatever. I think in our time there were, I don't remember having things that people are happening now doing supplementaries. You repeated the year if you failed subjects. Yes. So when we started year 1, I think we were 60. By the time we were finishing year 5, we were 54. So some of our colleagues dropped along the way, but most of them eventually finished. But because if you are deferred a year here and there, you eventually qualified as a. It was very rare for somebody to be discontinued. In fact, I remember there was only one of our classmates in year 1 who was discontinued because his performance was not up to standard. But as far as I remember, none of the others that we left behind got discontinued. So they eventually all managed to graduate as doctors, but of course, different years. So our year of graduation is actually more than 50 years. We graduated in 69. 1969 was our year of graduation. And we graduated then, of course, in that time, because the medical school covered the whole of East Africa, 1/3 of us were Ugandans, 1/3 of us were Kenyans, 1/3 of us were Tanzanians. Of course, those days it was called Tanganyika. So each one of us went to their respective countries to do internship. During that time, of course, Mulago was the only hospital that was sanctioned for internship. So those of us who graduated from our year started our internship in the Mulago Hospital. Yes. I feel sad that now where we did our training, our younger people are not using the same building that we used. Okay, at that time it used to be called the Neo Molago, but now I hear it is whatever. It has become a specialized unit, but that's where we did our undergraduate training. That's where we did our postgraduate training. When you finish your medical school, you start internship, you finish, then you are employed by the government.
All right. You know, about that, currency was the East Africa Shilling. Am I correct at that time?
You know, that was the days of the East African, the proper East African, not the current East African.
Not the current EAC in the community. Tell me, what was the economy like then? Because clearly they could afford scholarships to people who are thriving in their careers like you. So what was the economy like under the East Africa Shilling and under East Africa at the time? Do you remember anything significant?
Okay, first of all, the support from HSC through university was paid for by the government.
Yes.
So the parents used to try and make sure that their kids go into higher school, into Makerere or whatever, Dar es Salaam or Nairobi, because then the government took over paying the fees. It's not like these days where they're paying for a few, but all of us who went to university during those days, we were actually paid for by the government.
Yes.
And then when you finish, as I was mentioning, you did your internship. During the internship, that is when the Public Service Commission came to interview us for becoming civil servants. Yeah. So, yeah.
And the job of civil service was highly regarded. It was an honorary role, I'm sure. This year, Makerere University is celebrating 100 years since it began.
Yes.
What two important things for you that have changed, or that have changed for the good, or maybe you wish hadn't happened? What would you say that one thing that has changed for the good and one thing you wish hadn't happened, had remained as it was in the time when you were there, as they celebrated 100 years?
I'm not too sure I could be able to say what's there now, because I don't have first-hand experience of what is there now. But life in Makerere during our time was probably very different, because all of us used to be housed on. We didn't have people living off campus.
Wait, excuse me. There's someone who has their...
Yeah. So there was all of us were housed on campus.
Yes.
And you didn't have to look for accommodation from other places.
Yes.
So definitely that, I think, that is very different.
Yes.
Of course, the numbers of students has greatly increased. I don't know how many they are taking in now, but in our period, numbers were limited, probably according to what could be accommodated within the respective campuses as they were then. So that is something that I think has greatly changed.
Yes.
Many of the staff also used to live on campus. Or some could be housed outside campus, but again in university houses.
All right.
Probably that has also changed. I'm not sure.
Yes, it has changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
But we do try and accommodate as many staff within the campus, I'm sure. Now, you went on to specialize as a pediatric fellow. But from your childhood, you also mentioned that there was a flutist. And you're a musician, so are your children, so are your grandchildren. We know that your son Chigundu is actually the director. Before we even get into family, music. Why do you think music is important, and at what point do you remember being introduced to it?
Okay, music I think started in Gayaza.
Yeah.
We had, during those days, it was basically singing. We didn't learn playing instruments and so forth. Although at the time, I think Makerere College School was probably the only school that was teaching instrumental playing. We had our music teacher who was, she used to actually, she was a violinist and she used to play the viola as well, and a bit of piano, but she never taught any of us to play those instruments, but she taught us how to sing. I can remember correctly, she was pitch perfect. If you are in the choir and she would listen to out of the group and help you to sing in tune. In fact,
how about those who are completely
when we were preparing for festival, because sometimes the test piece used to be difficult. I remember one of them was very difficult with those semitones and whatever. She literally took us one by one to ensure that each one of us sang in tune. Wow. So I think that in a way shaped my way in going into in singing. Of course, there was always the festival choir, but we also had the Gayaza singers. Gayaza singers were voluntary. The festival choir, we used to audition to be in the and then Miss Gaylor decided which voice you would sing. You didn't have a choice, because I remember when I started singing, I was in the alto voice. Eventually, then of course, maybe she realized I wasn't an alto. She pushed me into the soprano voice. But you had no choice. Where she put you, you stayed there.
I think that's a teacher that is worth her name.
So that I think probably started. And then when I went to Budo, the Budo also had the Budo Nightingales. Budo Nightingales was by invitation. So if you didn't know how to sing, you wouldn't be invited to join the Budo Nightingales. Well, I was invited to join the Budo Nightingales.
Of course you were. You had worked hard and you had had training previously.
And then, of course, because there was opportunities, I also started a bit of piano playing. We could be taught how to play. Okay, I didn't go very far, but at least I started a bit of, I went as, HSC is only 2 years. And by the time you start learning ABCD of music, year 1 is finished. But I did, at least I picked up some piano.
Yes.
And I can be able to pick up voice when I need to correct myself and whatever.
No, so, you're wonderful. I heard you singing when you were being interviewed by, I think it was Kenyatta Women's Hospital. You were leading the fellowship. And you conducted last year. So you have a great voice. You still have it. Now,
yeah, when I went to Kenya, I actually took some voice lessons from the conservatoire.
Oh, you did?
And I actually did grade 8 singing when I was in Nairobi. Yeah, I did grade 8 singing.
Highly impressive.
Yeah.
You're going to tell us about Nairobi. I do know that you did your neonatal pediatric fellowship in the UK in 1977.
Yes.
What are some of your ongoing thoughts and concerns about your family in Uganda during that particular time? Is there anything that comes to mind which you wouldn't mind sharing?
I'm not too sure what you mean, because I had been, by the time I went to do my neonatology, I was still in Uganda.
Oh, you did? You were in Uganda?
I left, yeah, I left beginning of 77.
Yes.
To do my neonatology with the hope of coming back to Uganda.
Yes.
But many of you knew the events of what happened in 1977. A lot of Ugandans actually left Uganda. And at that time, I was newly married. Mm-hmm. My husband had moved to Kenya while I was in the UK. So, of course, when I finished, I had to go and join him in Nairobi. So that's how I ended up in Nairobi.
That's how you ended up, yes. But from there, you clearly thrived. And Kenya clearly formed a large part of your career. You introduced lots of medical initiatives that changed the landscape. Would you kindly share about some of the experiences you had as a pediatrician in Nairobi with your family as well in Nairobi? A young family, you're a career woman, and you come to Kenya, not by choice, but you made it work. Whatever challenges happened, you overcame, and you had tremendous success. Share with us a bit about that, especially as a woman with a young family and a growing career.
Okay, you see, when you move countries,
yes,
you have to embrace what happens there. And many of my colleagues in Kenya actually said, you are a Kenyan. One of them keeps, even up to now, still says, you are Kenyan. Because of course, I built up my career in Kenya. My family both my children were born in Kenya, partially raised up in Kenya, partially, of course, they came to secondary school in Uganda, but primary school, they were in Kenya. Now, when you join the medical profession, one of the things that happens is that dedication to work. I think many of us know that even when you are not a doctor, when you want a doctor, you want them to be there all the time. And quite often, sometimes even some patients don't remember that you are also a human being who can be able to do other things. So when you choose to have a family, then you have to say, okay, now I have a career, I have children to bring up. How do I plan my time so that I can be able to be with them, as well as fulfilling the job that you are doing. When they are younger, of course, you know that maternity leave is only about 3 months or so. You have to go back to work. Fortunately for me, I think by the time I had my children, I had already finished my training. So it was just work, combining work and families. Of course, when you go into academics, you still have to read quite a lot, but you don't have to be working towards a degree or a fellowship or whatever. So how did I do it? First of all, when they were breastfeeding, I used to be able to go home during the lunchtime. And then I would plan my days so that I could be home. Of course, most of the time, but quite often, sometimes when you are on duty, sometimes you cannot be at home. So what do? You express your breast milk and leave it for the person who will feed the baby until you get home. Now, as they get off the breast and they start becoming toddlers and whatever, you still have to play your role as a mom. I've related how our mom used to tell us stories. So I carried that with me to try and teach my children some of the stories that I learned as a young child. And you know, there's one they usually liked. So, like these days, when you read a book, the child there will be one book they want you to read 100 times.
Yes.
In fact, I remember there was, the stories, you told them the Uganda stories that I learned as a child, but there was one book that they liked, and that book was Peter Goes to School.
Okay.
That book, I don't know how many times we read that book, Peter Goes to School, but it doesn't matter. You know, with a small child, the more you repeat, the more they learn.
Yes.
You know, they learn it by heart, so that if you jump
A page,
they tell you, but you have not told us about that.
you know, why don't you tell us more about them? Tell us their names. I'm sure they don't mind, and tell us a bit about them, raising them, because they're both brilliant. Would you mind telling us their names and you know, a bit about their personalities and what you feel you passed on to them?
Okay, you've already mentioned Chigundu, who is here in Uganda, who is married with 3 children, and is trying to raise them, hopefully, the way they think is appropriate for them. My daughter is Beverly Nambozo, who also actually went to Gayaza. I think S1 year is 94, if I remember correctly. And she did both her O-level and A-levels in Gayaza before going to university. She went back to Kenya. Came back because I'm still thinking Nairobi. And then joined the Daystar and did a course in communication. Chigundu actually at Makerere did engineering, although now he's a musician. But personally, as a parent, I keep saying, as long as you can put food on the table,
Yes.
It doesn't matter what you end up doing.
Thank you. That's
the most important thing. Yeah.
Right now, for this conversation, I think there are 3 volumes of books you could write from the wisdom you shared. On top of that, a series that we could watch. There's just so much. And even now, I'm changing the way I'm parenting in my mind.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're a woman growing up, you're dynamic, you're dedicated, you're extremely focused. Again, in the pediatric fellowship, coming back to Kenya, tell us about the Kangaroo Method. I know specifically that you were instrumental in introducing that at Kenyatta Hospital, was it? Can you tell us how that came about and why it was so important to you? Now,
kangaroo, I believe many of you know the kangaroo in Australia. What happens with the kangaroo baby? Kangaroo baby is born prematurely. They scroll out of the uterus and get attached to the mom's, in the pouch, they get attached to the mom's nipple and start sucking until they're old enough to jump out of the pouch. Now, the Kangaroo Method actually started in Bogota, Colombia. The pediatricians there realized now, because especially for us in the so-called middle and low income countries, we don't have facilities for all those incubators, and whatever you end up having, putting 2-3 babies in one incubator. So somebody, I can't quite recall the names, but the pediatricians in Bogota said, now the kangaroo baby comes out premature. Why can't we try that with our premature babies in our newborn units? So they, I think, they started that method in 1978. Of course, being scientists, they published, and then the kangaroo spread so that now it is fully embraced by the World Health Organization as a way of looking after premature babies. Okay, I should probably say that when I went to Kenyatta National Hospital and University of Nairobi, yes, they had a newborn unit, but I became in charge of that unit as a neonatologist. And whatever I could see that was very useful, we tried. So we introduced the Kangaroo Method. I can't remember, I think it was in the year 2000. And we continued, but the kangaroo is now a global good. The other thing that probably that now coming, I'm thinking about my work in the newborn unit in Kenyatta, was to ensure that all babies were actually given their own mom's milk. Because when I went there was a lot of use of formula, but the mothers were there. And we know that mother's milk is the best. So we said, okay, let moms express their milk. I've already taught about expression of breast milk for the baby. Even if the baby is too little to be able to suck from the breast, they can actually be fed mother's milk either through a tube or a cup. So those are things that I helped to initiate when in our Kenyatta National Hospital newborn unit. The other thing probably that I helped to start was the neonatal nursing course. We were two pediatricians at the time that I joined. Actually, my co-pediatrician came a bit later than. Then he said, okay, yes, we have trained in neonatology, but we don't have neonatal nursing. What do we do? So we put our heads together, got some of the nurses, because none, I think in Kenya at that time, there was only one nurse who had done any neonatal nursing, who was working in Kenyatta. So we got together as a team and designed the neonatal nursing course. So we started this as a in-house training our nurses to do what we felt was appropriate. Gradually, it became recognized by the Nursing Council. So we could draw in people from outside of Kenyatta to come and learn neonatal nursing in Kenyatta. So those are some of the programs that I helped to start in our neonatal unit in Kenyatta.
And they hold you in high esteem, understandably. They hold you in high esteem. And that's really understandable. I'm going to invite questions from the guests. I know one of your friends, Dr. Hilda, sends greetings. If there are questions from the audience, please bring them in the chat. And I would also like to invite Sophia. Sophia is going to share with us our guest for next month, Pearls of Wisdom. Professor Rachel Musoke is a pediatrician, a family woman, gained tremendous success through challenges. She went through Gayaza High School and King's College, Buddo. Buddo was by choice because they offered sciences at that time, which Gayaza did not. She got government scholarships to go through medicine, and here she is today sharing with us, understandably, pearls of wisdom. So please bring in your question, and I'll invite Sophia to share with us our guest for next month. Thank you so much, Professor. I'm so glad we still have more time with you this morning. Maybe take a cup of water as we listen to Sophie for a bit. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Beverly, and thank you very much, Professor Musoke. It's very inspirational listening to your story and you not sitting back and waiting for things to be done around you when you can find and offer solutions. So it's very, very inspirational for me. I'd like to take this opportunity at the halfway point to introduce our next guest. The guest who will be joining us next month. As we said, this is a monthly series. We have a guest join us and we learn from them. And next month, on the 12th of March, we will have Professor Maggie Chigozie. So most of us have heard about her. We know her. She's an old Gayaza girl. She has done phenomenal things for our economy here in Uganda, most notably on the Uganda Investment Authority, which is a position she used to promote a lot of projects for women in Uganda. And I read something that made me smile this morning, that we know her as that person who has influenced a lot of social and economic development around us in Uganda, but she's also the mother to Navio. So for the younger viewers and younger generation, they will know Navio, and we will be speaking to her mother next month. She is on the call today. I wonder whether she'll have a moment to say either hello now or later on, just before we finish the call. Professor Chigozie, are you on? If you'd like to say hello, and then we'll hear again from her towards the end. So just a quick hello, and then we can carry on.
Yes, hi ladies. I am here. Very, very happy to listen to my prefect, my senior, Dr. Rachel. So proud of her. I also worked in Kenyatta Hospital for a few years, basically about 4 or 5 years. And she's been there all her life. So Rachel, really, really proud of you, and the Kenyans love you to bits, I know. Yes, hi girls. I will be with you next time and share my story in the way that Rachel has done hers. Yes, I guess that's all I have to say. So you where I am, this is Pineapple Bay. It's really beautiful. So if you get a chance to have a holiday, this is the place to come to. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Chigozie. And it looks interesting in the background of where you were, and enjoy the break that you have over there. Back to you, Beverly, and we carry on with Professor Musoke. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Professor Maggie. We're definitely going to Pineapple Bay next holiday. Professor, we do have questions for you.
Yeah, but before you do, let me emulate Maggie. You know, I used to be a tennis player.
Oh my goodness.
And yes. I remember when I was in Budo, Maggie and her team came to have a tournament with us. So Maggie will share something in common.
Oh, you are unstoppable. Yeah. That's all I can say. You are unstoppable. As I said,
I played tennis for Makerere for twice. So Maggie, I'm glad you are there.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're so inspirational. A question from Livia Nyaika, and Livia is an old girl from Gayaza. She wants to know, did you speak Kiswahili before going to Nairobi, and what were some of the culture shocks or challenges that you had?
Okay. When we were in medical school, because we were East African, we had some rudimentary teaching in Swahili, because we used to have, actually, some of the patients coming to Mulago used to come from Kenya. And as I said, some of the My classmates were Kenyan, others were Tanzanians, and you know Tanzanians, their language is Swahili. So I knew a little bit of rudimentary Swahili before I went to Nairobi. But of course, once you are there, because it's the national language, and the majority of the patients that you look after are probably not very fluent in English, you have to be able to be fluent. I can't claim to be fluent, but I know enough to be able to talk with my the mothers of the children, and of course the older children who would be coming to the hospital. So I do speak a bit of Swahili, but I don't think I can say I'm fluent.
All right. So at least you had enough to manage and be influential and successful. Another question about raising children, the transition to teenagehood. That's from Robin Alukwago, another old girl from Gayaza. Would you mind sharing advice on how to raise and support children through the transition to teenagehood?
Adolescents, as we know them, okay, WHO defines adolescence as from 10 to 19 years. And of course, those are the times that children are transiting from primary to secondary school. Generally speaking, as pediatricians, we divide the adolescents into three phases: the early, the middle, and the late adolescents. The brain of an adolescent is actually still growing. And quite often, many of us as parents, we think, now the child is big enough, I don't have to be there for them. That child who is going through adolescence still needs you as much as the toddler, because that's when habits are forming. If you are not at home, this is the time the adolescent will go into habits that you may not be wanting them to learn. For example, we know that most of the children become addicted to drugs, alcohol, and so forth in their adolescent years. Smoking is also something that really starts. So it's very important for us as parents to be there, watch them. If you are not at home, most of the time, as may be happening to some of us who are working, you come home, you're tired, you don't want to be bothered, you go be with your whatever. This is where bad habits can be. So I think it's very important for us to establish a good relationship with your children, and it starts early on. If you are not friends with your child, you are not friends with your adolescent, they will not listen to you. So establish that friendship right from the beginning. Share. If they're doing something that you don't think is something that you value, sit down and discuss it. Show them responsibility. But at the same time, I think probably I should have said, children learn from you. And quite often you say, okay, do as I say and not as I do. If you're going to be a drunkard and the child sees you as a drunkard, you cannot say don't drink. Or if, okay, that is an extreme, but any habit that you feel is not good in you, first of all, try and make sure you remove that habit from you so that the kids are not copying what you're. So show them what life is all about. These days, there's so much internet and everything and so forth. Be there, find out what are their interests. What are their capabilities? Because quite often as parents, we force children into things that probably they are not interested in. So from an early stage, see where their interests are and try and nurture that interest, because that may be the thing that will help them to whatever. If I may relate to Namudu, she really enjoyed art. And art at the time was not looked at as something that you could do at A level, but she really wanted to do it. So I told her, if you want to do it, do it. But now as a graphics person, this graphics designer, I think it's very useful for her to have learned the basics of art, to use, even though she's now using computers and whatever, to be able to develop, so see where the child's interests are and build them on. Are they academic? Are they other things? Now we know athletes, professional athletes learn and many more than many of us will ever thought of. But if we didn't encourage our children to be to do whatever game they are excellent on, they will never be able to go into the professional field of whatever game. So I think it's very important for us to nurture the talent that the child has. Don't expect them to go into the field that you went in. Many people ask me, none of your children became a doctor. I said, it was their choice. I didn't want to push them to do what they didn't choose to be. And that is something that many of us parents teach them to be independent. I talked about learning how to look after themselves and whatever. So all those are things that are very important. One of the things probably that is probably very crucial, have at least one meal together as a family. Usually probably it will be the evening meal, because usually in the early morning, everybody is rushing to go to work. Mid-morning, nobody is at home. I mean, lunchtime. But if at all possible, make dinner time or supper time a family time. You know, many of the things that you are going to talk about, you're not going to sit, let's talk. They will come through as they mention something as you are doing. Then you say, that's something that you can pick up and then discuss it. But if you never have, and when I say family together, meal together, no TV. Because if you're watching TV as you're eating, the eyes are glued on TV. Nobody's going to listen to what each other. So switch up all your gadgets, be it your phone, whatever. Have a meal where you can enjoy being together, share whatever has happened with your day. This is where you're going to find out how school was if your children are coming back from school. That is if your child is in a day school. But if they're in a boarding school, when you're in holiday time, this is the time that you're going to find out how is the school shaping your child. Are there things that you can be able to chip in when they're with you during the holiday time? Because unfortunately, these days, there's a lot of restrictions in parent visiting schools, which I think is wrong. A child still belongs to the mother and the father, so there should be free visiting. When we were in secondary school, your parent could come in anytime. Now I hear there's a specific day. If you never manage to go to school that specific day, you will not be able to see your child. I think that is wrong. But going back to having family time, having time with your family influence the values that you think are important as they are growing up. Because by the time they go to university, those are the values that they will take with them. Once they are in university, they are gone. Okay, this university, they still come home for holidays and whatever. But if you didn't nurture them early on, they will not listen to. They are already, in fact, by the time they are in most of them, when they are university, they are adults. They are over 18, isn't it?
Yes.
So then you say, that is yours. Me, I'm an adult, I have a freedom of how to behave. But even during that time, even if they are at university, it's still important for you to be able to discuss some of the things that you think are still home permanently. And one hopes that by the time they are graduated to university, they are able to live permanently outside of your household. Of course, sometimes they, yeah, they may stay on until they are able to earn something to be able to pay for a room or whatever. But by the time you leave, you finish university, you should be able to live independently. But if you didn't nurture that person up to that time, they still have difficulties.
That's insightful information. Sometimes we have teenage children and we think there's so much time, and yet there isn't. There are more questions about parenting, but you've answered it already about how to balance between being a parent and a friend and that transition from 12 onwards. A question from Irene Kajimo. She appreciates the session. She's doing her master's in pediatric fellowship. Well, she's doing a master's and she wants to be a pediatrician, Makerere University. She has noted that they need more neonatologists in the special care units. There are 2 of them currently in the country. It would be a blessing, she says, for them to be mentored by you as a visiting doctor. You have lived and walked the talk. So maybe that's a discussion you could have with the neonatology department at Makerere University as a visiting fellow or a visiting professor to inspire them and encourage them in their journey. Thank you for that so much.
I think they are already aware that I'm around.
Yes.
I'm waiting for the invitation.
All right. So Irene, she's ready.
Yes, I could start doing it voluntarily. But anyway, that one I think we can work out with the department.
All right. And Mrs. Christine Chiganda is proud of you and your accomplishments. You have an extremely modest outlook that sits on a wealth of priceless talents. She shares Yoga's experiences, especially music, as many of us know. And can you share how you intend to take advantage of retirement to enjoy your numerous amazing talents and skills?
Okay. Sometimes people say retirement, but do we retire until you are finally gone from this world? So I think probably you just shift the way you function, because okay, you retire, but you can't just sit at home doing nothing.
Yes.
You have to find ways of occupying yourself. But in such a way that it's also gives you a chance to relax. The way, okay, so far that I'm spending my time is, of course, I still join in some of the webinars with the Uganda Pediatric Association, some of the Kenya webinars, I still join in some of them, so that at least to keep my brain functioning, so that you you know, it is said if you don't use your brain, it goes very fast. So find ways of using your brain, even if you are not actually working. So that's something that I've been doing, and I've been actually even joining webinars from, you know, now, one of the things probably we've gained from COVID is being able to poach on webinars that are happening right around the world. So you just register, you join, you listen, and there's still a lot to learn, even though you are not practicing. You've got to make sure you have relaxation time. For me, my relaxation time, I still exercise. I don't play tennis anymore, but I do my home exercises. I do a lot of yoga, cycling, whatever, walking, and so forth, to keep me fit. In fact, somebody was asking me the other day, you don't look your age. What do you do? I said, probably because I've continued exercising, so that if the joints are becoming a bit stiff, you still move them around so that they don't become completely stiff. And it's a way, do something that you enjoy doing. Then what else am I doing? Yeah, I'm hoping that I'll be able to either volunteer or do some more help for our upcoming pediatricians, especially the neonatology course that has been raised. So that, I think, would be something that I could do very well. The other thing that I may be able to do is helping moms to breastfeed. I've been an advocate for breastfeeding for a long time, and that's something that I could still do. And I remember somebody asking me, oh, you still promote breastfeeding? I said, okay, as long as there are still new mothers having babies, breastfeeding will never get out of context. So that's something that I could still do if I find how to do it. So those are things that I think are going to help me to transit. Having moved from Kenya to Uganda, I'm still finding my way around. It's unfortunate that I came during the COVID time. So some of the things that I would have gone to see, to be able to fit in and whatever, are still restricted. But I'm sure we shall open up, and with time, I'll be able to fit in, but making sure that I also have my me time. Some of the things that I didn't mention, even whatever age you are, me time is very important. Whether you are single, you have a family, me time means doing the things that you like. Doing, it could be visiting friends, it could be music, it could be dancing, anything that keeps you away from other people, but you can still be with other people, but the me time is very important. That's when you reflect, how am I doing? How is my body doing? So those are things that I'm trying to do. So some of the time, you just sit and say, I'm listening to my body. For example, when I have not exercised for a number of days, my body tells me you haven't exercised. So I wake up and do some exercise.
There's so many people Thank you. You know, everything you're doing is working. It's excellent because you just embody excellence. That's what you radiate. You radiate magnificent strides. You radiate somebody who has accomplished and yet who is settled and content. Contentment is the right word. You radiate contentment. And that's really, really impressive. There are some people who think they're too busy to exercise. Well, soon they'll get enough time to rest for a full day when their body breaks down. So take time to exercise, have me time. Thank you, Professor. Greetings from your son, Chigundu, who's on the call. He's very blessed by the session.
Before we leave me time, there's something I've just remembered. When we were in Budo, we used to have 5-minute break between lessons. And you are to get out of the class, do whatever you do, and then get back to class. Now, people who are now health conscious, and especially people who are working on computers, are telling us the same thing. So that's a habit that those of us who are working, especially sit-down work, make sure that every 1 hour, take 5 minutes. Walk around, exercise your, rest your eyes. In fact, I rest is said to be every half hour, rest your eyes, and so forth. So there are a few things that we did in school which we didn't think they were important, but now we're thinking back, that was something that we should have carried on.
They're invaluable lessons, they really are. Yeah. And after this, people should stretch, walk about a bit, take water, and early lunch, whatever it may be. Yeah. And greetings from Chigundu. He's on the call and he says he's blessed by the session. He greets everybody here.
Thank you.
All right, another question in, and this one came in before. What can women do to advance in their career without appearing too aggressive, but in order to be appreciated as equal players in the field, especially where in many sectors, men are still considered more important? So what can we do without appearing aggressive, but really staking our place in what is still considered a male-dominated world?
I think first and foremost, when it comes to work, especially if you're working in a corporation and whatever, I know women right globally have been marginalized in many ways. But I think what we have to remember is being aggressive in any relationship doesn't work. The more aggressive you become, the more negative you draw from the people. So I think what we can do is, first of all, put forward your point. For example, if you are in a field that needs whatever, put your point forward, not because you are a woman, but you are an expert in whatever you're putting forward. Sometimes people may look down at it, but quite often you find that when you've given some suggestion, it may be downplayed, but then when you come back again, somebody else actually raises the same thing that you raised. Now, what you just recognize is, okay, this is something that I put forward. So don't just say, oh, that is what I said. Appreciate that somebody else has picked it up, whether it is a man or a woman who has done it. Then that way, somebody later on will say, actually, it was so and so who brought up that point at the time, but we didn't think at the time that it was important. So I think let's also be firm in what we do, firm without being aggressive. I'm not too sure how to feel it, but being firm doesn't mean you force somebody to do something. You suggest, you discuss, and then get to a point where you can get a win-win situation rather than a win-lose situation. I think Covey was a person who was very fond of those, those of you who have read his books. Get to a point where you can see a win-win. Sometimes you find a compromise between what is they think and what you think. That may be something that maybe help you to, so work towards a win-win field. Unless, because when you're always on the losing end, you'll always be downtrodden. But if you want to reach a win-win area, then put your point. Sometimes learning how to pause. I think again, it is Steve Covey who said, use the pause button quite a lot. Pause and reconsider. Maybe you put forward a suggestion, and then as you pause, you say, perhaps it wasn't quite right. Why don't I put it in another way? And then when you do that, you find that things come through. Personally, I've found that a useful way of getting points across. Occasionally, you put up a point and then you keep quiet. Then people say, why are you quiet? But you are pausing to reconsider what next. Then as you pause, you think, because sometimes what makes us explode is rushing through something. Maybe you are angry, and when you're angry, you say things that you probably didn't mean to say. So when you pause, then you say, okay, I said this, but maybe we can do it this way. Then you find a halfway solution. Probably that's one of the ways that we can, as we deal with anybody, it doesn't just mean men, women versus men. It could be women versus women. Some of us women are very aggressive. Some of us are not so aggressive, but that's something.
What great wisdom. Lots of people appreciate your great wisdom. Thank you so much, Professor Musoke. Thank you for talking about me time and emphasizing self-care. A lot of appreciation, understandably. You are exercising your brain at this age, and that's what you said is important in retirement. May I please give you another task? Why don't you get a team to start writing your biography? I think that is wonderful. And as I say that, to follow up, what do you think about creating legacies? What does that mean for you, creating legacies? You've talked about Stephen Covey. I would 5 years from now, people to say, according to Professor Musoke. So have you thought about writing a book, and what do you feel about leaving legacies? What does that mean to you?
I think that's a great idea. It's something that has been with me for some time, but I think I need to throw away the inertia and start. When I was in Nairobi, one of my friends whom I used to share office with me, used to push me, why don't you write a book about breastfeeding? And that's something that I should be able to do with my experience and whatever, and then maybe people will be able to, because the books we read about breastfeeding are from the Western world. Now, the way they do it is very different from the African way of doing it. So that's something that probably I should be able to do quite easily. And I think we are getting a lead. We have not, I think, basically speaking, we have not been in the habit of writing about ourselves.
Yes.
That is really a biography. And I remember pushing my sister Joyce for quite some time. Why don't you write? Why don't you write? But eventually she finally wrote.
Yes.
But, and of course, many of you have also seen Rhoda Kalema's book and whatever. And you mentioned Wangari Maathai and all the other women around the world who have. So I think that's something that I probably need to take up, and it should be able to occupy some of the time that I have.
Please do. You have a lot of energy. You are exciting to listen to, and you express contentment. Just listening to you today has given me boundless knowledge I never knew I had. Chikundu speaks, and he speaks on behalf of Samali as well. He says he wants you to know that they are proud of who you are and what you've done for them as their children. He knows you're an extrovert, but whenever you couldn't express something, you always found it in a book, which you would read. And you mentioned that, the story of Peter, which they would make you read 100 times. And you would read together with them. He really appreciates that, especially as adolescents. They knew how to read much, at a more advanced stage than many of their peers, and you took advantage of that. Stephen Covey was and still is big, and the grandchildren are now reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. I taught a couple of your grandchildren. I must say, Professor Musoke, really been nurtured well. They're advanced in reading, in creative expression, and in understanding life. And I really, really owe that to you as a parent and to your children as well, who have been instrumental, thanks to your guidance as well, and from how you are raised as a family. So he wants you to know that as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. It's good to know, because sometimes you are, okay, one of the things you had asked me, what did you put to, what do you think your children got from you? It's very hard to know what they got from until they say it themselves, and I'm glad Chigundu has aired some of those whatever, and I do appreciate that he has put it forward for us.
That's wonderful, and it's also recorded. And then there'll be more. About your social life, you were in Uganda, you were in Kenya. How would you define home? What does that mean to you? You grew up in an extended family from a young age, so you always had relatives, cousins, and your parents paid for many of your cousins, their school fees. And so home has been defined in many interesting ways, I'm sure. You lived in Kenya largely, and also Uganda, your children as well. So in your own words, how would you define home?
It's a very difficult thing to define, but home is where you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, then, sometimes we say feel at home. What does it mean to be feel at home? It means you are comfortable, you are able to do what you will want to do, and you are able to relax and so forth. A home is not only you and your immediate family, but the people around you. As you mentioned, okay, for us, home was a home of many people. But probably we didn't mind it. There were always relatives within the home. But also, you could be taken, for example, let me give one example. When I was in '66, when the crisis of Uganda came, and I had remained on campus with because it had been felt unsafe for me to be able to be commuting from my home to be doing my holiday job in Morocco. So, because I don't know, I think my sister had talked with Mrs. Kajivi, and they were on campus. I was just there, and Elsie comes and says, "How can you sit in Mary Stewart when we were just down So pack up your things, let's go to my. Now, so when that happened, you see that these are people that I knew they were, okay, Senteza was a cousin, but we regarded him as a brother in the African sense. So I went and lived with them. So now that was home. So you build up a relationship within the extended family, and you grow up being part and parcel of that extended family. They visit, you visit. Friends also are very important. Okay, when we moved to Kenya, we didn't have many relatives. So most of our relatives were actually our friends. To the extent that, not so long ago, somebody was saying, it's a pity we brought up these kids regarding each other as cousins. Now they can't even marry each other because they think I can't marry so because he's my cousin. And yet there was no blood relationship. But you see now, those who are now the relationship that we created when we were home away from home. And even up to now, I still liaise with the friends that I made in Nairobi. We still chat, we still find out what's happening to each other and so forth. So coming back here doesn't mean I've left my friends in Nairobi. I still chat with them off and on. In fact, one of my colleagues from time to time just picks up the phone and we talk. Yeah. So a home is an extended, it's not just the house you live in, but the environment, personally, I think the environment you are in.
Yes, that's really powerful. One of the things you shared is that schools should teach financial management. And you said that you learned a bit about saving. There was a bank in the school where you were in Gayaza High School. Can you tell us about investing today? Is that something you think you could speak into? Any investment wisdom you could share with us today, who are caught up in so many things?
Okay, I said in Gayaza, all that we learned is whenever we're given pocket money, we gave it to the teachers, and it used to be called a bank.
Okay.
And you used to go to draw money from that bank until the last lot was finished. But it was a regulated bank. You couldn't draw more than X amount. I can't remember the amount that you couldn't draw more than, unless you had a reason to be able to do that. But that didn't teach us how to save, because pocket money was pocket money. And we weren't told that, okay, you can save a shilling or whatever, 10 cents as, 10 cents then was a lot of money. You could buy 10 kabalagalas from 10 cents. They used to be, it used to cost 1 cent. So you do. But investment, I think we are learning, most of us are learning late. That's why I mentioned that it's a pity that we are not taught at the time that we should be taught. Because the investment, from what I know now, should have started from the first salary that I earned, rather than giving it to the bank to use it the way they use it. I know they use our money, although they think it's their money. You are not told, even the bank didn't tell you how to use that money. Of course, now they do, but in those days, they didn't tell you how to use that money. But at least now, I think they are doing a few of sessions with clients to be able to learn how to invest. But those things were not there. So when you have your money, you don't even know where to put it. There used to be a savings account. Okay, you could put your money into a savings account, but it doesn't earn you a lot of money. Probably what one could do is, once you saved a reasonable amount, then find something that will give you more income. And those things can be different. Where would there is of course now these days there's the money market, there's whatever, and so many other avenues, which in our time as we were growing up, we were never taught. That's why I mentioned earlier on that I wish the younger generation could learn that the minute you start earning, you start investing. And just certainly some people who do it, by the time you are 30, 40, you've invested so much that you can relax. Some of us have continued working so long because probably we didn't invest enough, and you depend on the salary that you are earning to be able to survive. That should not be the case. We should reach a point that you say, I don't have to be employed by so and so. I can live on what I saved, wherever, or what I invested, wherever I invested. I think that's something that we all have to learn. And as you people, younger people, as you bring up your children, this is something that I think you should be teaching your children if they're not being taught in school.
Yes. Thank you. And about investment, I must say this has been a wonderful investment for me and for everyone who has been on the call. Professor Musoke, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for this time. Somebody called Liz had her hand up. I don't know if it was a question that she had, but a lot of appreciation for what you have done for us. We're now winding up the call. It has been recorded, and I know that the people in charge will definitely share the recording with you and with others who are interested. A huge appreciation. My appreciation is endless, and I look forward to seeing you more and more in person, especially. You've opened my eyes to so much. It's just really been important. As we go, would you like to give any parting remarks to the people who have been on the call? And the number has been maintained between 42 and 40. So you've had such.
First of all, to say that I'm available to discuss anything that anybody would want to discuss, be it medical or otherwise. So I think that's one thing. As we wind up, maybe one of the things that I didn't mention when I went to Budo, something funny. You know, Budo being a boys' school, most of the teachers were men. Majority of them actually were men. Now, during that time, of course, many of them were from the UK and whatever. And men in the British culture were taught ladies first. Meaning if you get at the door and there's a man and a woman, the lady will be allowed to go first. When I went to Budo, it happened to me. Remember, I was still just a student. Now, one day I was getting out of class, and the teacher was getting out of class at the same time. The teacher went aside to allow me to pass. And I said, what? Well, I mean, having been in Gayaza, you could not, a teacher had always to get out first before you did. Now, here's a teacher giving you away because he was a gentleman. And I think that's something that that stayed with me for a long time. And it happened to me again another time when I was in Nairobi. I was entering a public place, And there was a gentleman entering with me. He stepped aside and he said, you know, as we were taught, ladies first. So he allowed me to go in, and he was saying, the boys and girls don't you just push your way through. That's something that that I keep laughing at most of the time. So that is something. And the other thing probably that I remember as we started working in Malago, there were very few women doctors. We were called nurses. And sometimes there was a time when we were on a ward round, we were 3 female doctors. And then the mothers were saying, these days we are not being seen by any doctor. There are only these nurses who go around. But of course, I think now the people do realize there are many women doctors. But those days we were regarded as nurses, but we didn't mind. We did our work as required. So those are some of the few things I remember from my past experience, which they are not important, but they're funny.
Oh, they're extremely important because you remind us of chivalry. And speaking for myself, maybe for others, I appreciate a man opening the door for me. While I appreciate equal opportunities for men and women, I appreciate when the door is open for me, when I'm treated with courtesy and respect. I believe it's not something we have to fight for. That's me, but I may be speaking for others. So thank you. It's really important you mentioned that, because those experiences are what shape and what help us to just have a proper comparative analysis and remind us as parents of how we can engage with our own children in a more holistic manner. Instead of just sharing them about today, let's share with them about the values that happened decades before they were born. Yeah. So what everything you've shared has been instrumental, definitely instrumental.
Yeah, it's been a joy to be with you. And I think I will also learn a lot as I listen to other speakers as time goes on. I listened in last month when I'm very bad with names. And you pick up, you say when you hear people talk, you pick up something that will impact on you.
Yes, true. No, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone. May I appreciate everyone who's been on the call. Thank you for engaging, for being informative, for being excited about our guest today, and for really being a part of this 2 hours on this Saturday morning. We wish you a wonderful rest of the day, a wonderful rest of the weekend. I'm going to invite Sophie again to officially close and to remind us about our next guest and the date, if the date has already been set. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. God bless you. God bless you, Professor Musoke. I know for us, the conversations are still ongoing, thankfully. And I'll bring my children to you as well. And so they are blessed.
You're most welcome.
Absolutely. They've met some of your sisters, so they must meet you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sophia, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Beverly, for taking us through a very, very interesting conversation. And Professor Musoke, I've got no words, I'm left speechless, but mostly inspired, very, very inspired by your advice about parenting and building relationships, strong relationships with teenage children and starting much earlier. So thank you very much. And I'm sure all of our guests have also taken very diverse and different pearls from your life's journey. As we've said before, this is a monthly series. This month has been Professor Musoke, who we will put the recording on YouTube for those who missed, or if you have any friends that missed and you'd like to get them to hear the same pearls that we just listened to, we will be sharing that. Next month, we will have Professor Maggie Chigozi, who has been a phenomenal woman in the Ugandan landscape, economically, career-wise, and as well as a family person, a very, very strong family person. And she does always makes reference to the strength of her commitment to family. So we will be taking her journey with her on the 12th of March, that's Saturday, the 12th of March, same time, 10 a.m. till about 12 p.m. please join us then. And with her, again, she's a Gayaza Old Girl. She has taken her career and her position to push and promote women in all spheres that she could help. So she is a strong advocate for the women's voice. And so we'll hear a bit about that. And we will also hear more about her career change. I think we will try and pick up some lessons on how she moved from being a doctor into corporate world. I won't spill any more than that, but she did move into the corporate world from a background in medicine. So we will be looking forward to that. Professor Maggie Chigozie on the 12th of March. If any of you would like to join these calls, please send us your number on the chat, either privately to me or Beverly, if you've got her on the chat, Akusa or Livia and Sanyu. Send the numbers there and we will pick up and notify you when the next series are coming. It's a series for us to learn from our elders, our people who've taken this path before we have, in order that we do not make mistakes that perhaps they may have made, or at least we prepare better for our own life journeys. So thank you very much, Beverly, for taking us through the conversation. Thank you very much, Professor Musoke, for sharing this with us. And definitely thank you to Samali and Chigundu for having shared their mom with us. We are very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone, and bye-bye. God bless.
Bye.
Bless you.
Thanks and bye.
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 Mhm.